Howdy, this is Mackenzie Franklin from SideGame LLC here in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Today we're going to be doing our library update for May 1st, 2022. These are all of the board games that entered our library, all the expansions, upgrades, and all of the things that we've pre-ordered for the SideGame Library. I'm excited to talk about all of these games and share some new favorites with some classics that we got into the library. If you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please make sure that you do. It is the best way to help us grow. And for all of you already subscribed, thank you so much for the continuous support. Let's get into what entered the library in April. Our first section is all about the upgrades that entered the library, starting off with some things for Architects of the West Kingdom. First, we have this really nice playmat that combines all of the expansion boards into one area, so you just simply flip out the mat and you're ready to go. I love it when they do this because the art is all in sync, and you gotta love that Miko artwork. Next, we have another item for Architects of the West Kingdom. This is the Collector's Box. It's gonna store all of our Architects content inside, include some extra promos, and we actually did an organizing video for this on the channel. Make sure to check that out. Our round 2 shipment came for Super Fantasy Brawl, including a lot of the plastic components, the base rings, the grandstand, the sleeves, the playmats. There's a lot to love here with all the upgraded components. However, my big recommendation here is get everything except for the Brawl grandstands. I do not like these cardboard components, and I made it pretty clear in our organizing video for the game. But everything else is wonderful. Get those sleeves, get those base rings, get those extra plastic components, so that way you can have multiple games running at the same time, and definitely get the neoprene mat so you don't have to get another board for the game. And our last upgrade are the metal coins for Caper Europe. I'll talk more about Caper Europe further down the update, but these coins are wonderful. They're nice, chunky, thick, and you'll be handling them a lot during the game. If you go to the Keymaster site, you can also buy the coins with the game itself, so you can get a bundle and save some money there. So awesome, love these coins. And that brings us to the new arrivals, the games and expansions that have entered the library, starting off with Batman The Dark Knight Returns, the board game. This is a solo experience where you play as the Caped Crusader. You'll be moving around Gotham, creating new bat paths, and trying to quell all the riots that are trying to pop up. You also have some villain that you're fighting against, a scenario objective, and it's an overarching campaign where you're trying to manage everything. At its heart, it's an action system that I love, and this dry erase board system is also extremely wonderful. Love the theming here. It's a great experience. This is Batman The Dark Knight Returns, the board game. Next is Caper Europe. This is a back and forth tug-of-war game where you are going to be trying to put out your thieves, equipping them with gear, and taking control of these locations while stealing artifacts along the way. One of my favorite parts about this game is how elegant the card play is. You play a card, it does the thing, you could protect other cards, you can combo, you're limited in the different areas you can play, and you have limits based on the characters that you place out, and there's a system where you're choosing the location where you're going to go on heists, and these different heists have different extra rules that are included in cards that you'll shuffle into the deck. It's such a wonderful package. I really can't find any big flaws with the game. It's just a wonder to play. That is Caper Europe. Up next is Longshot, the dice game. This has you playing a re-implementation of the original Longshot in a roll and write form. You'll be placing bets on horses with varying payouts and make a lot of money by the end of the entire experience. You'll be able to modify the different odds of these horses through different mini-games on your board, but ultimately you're just trying to be the richest player. We've got Journey's End for Nemo's War. This gives us a new rulebook for the game, new motives, characters, Nautilus upgrades, as well as finale and adventure cards. It also introduces a new competitive game mode, so you can take to the high seas with a new opponent. So lots of interesting content here that we're excited to play more of. We've got Detective Club Noir, which is just more additional cards for Detective Club. Pro tip, this was not printed in the Americas, but you can get it from Board Game Bliss. They have a French version of the game, but since everything's language independent, this is great because you can just get a French copy and then throw the cards in. Awesome, I recommend it. More art is always great for these Dixit-style experiences. Up next, we have the new Dune expansion, Choam and Richesse. These offer 2 new factions as well as some gameplay variants for the game overall, and I think this is a great addition for those classic Dune lovers. Next up is Vabanque, recommended to me by Chairman of the Board. I love this one. It has quickly become one of my new fillers because it's player-driven chaos. There's no randomness in the game, but chaos ensues nonetheless because of the prediction aspect and the betting and the different card play between the players. I love the way that this game unfolds and how it's so easy to teach and so easy to play, but gives you amazing experiences and great moments of, whoo, I got it, and whoo, my gosh, what the heck just happened? This is a wonderful game. I love Vabanque. Up next, we have Survive Escape from Atlantis. This one gives you the very much epitome of a take that experience. You have these little characters that you're going to be moving around the map, and you'll be sending them onto boats and moving them together, and then you can send these different monsters to each other. This game is wild. world. You're trying to get some of your characters off the island because they're worth different points, and trying to also sink all of your opponent's characters. I love how you can try to predict what the different characters' values are, and it's just a great time of sinking each other's ships and fleeing the sinking island. A lot to love here, and we got the 5th and 6th player expansions as well to add some new creatures as well as some more chaos with more players. Up next, we have the expansion for Blood Bowl Team Manager. This is Foul Play. Once again, a big shout out to my friends Jeff and Jenna for finding me a cheap copy of the original copy of the game. Awesome, because then I could spend some extra money on these expansions. Now, Foul Play introduces 3 new factions, my favorite one being this Goblin faction. They're wild in what they do, and you don't really have any bad cards in your deck, but you also don't have any incredibly strong cards. They work very funkily, and they have ways that they can summon more copies of themselves. Really cool. You also have some Plague Bringers with different infection tokens, and then a new cheating token that's going to give you penalties. I love this because it means that there's a lot more variety in the cheating tokens, which also boosts some of those old factions. In addition to all the upgrades earlier, we also got the new expansion for Architects of the West Kingdom, Works of Wonder. This adds some new features as well as a new board, some characters that populate and move around the board, and also the Works of Wonders. These give you permanent bonuses, and I love the way these are implemented because you're going to actually put that unique building onto a spot on the board, and every time you visit it, you get an additional bonus. What a cool concept, and I love the way this has integrated and evolved the different Architects of the West Kingdom experiences that you're going to be having. Up next, we have Perseverance, Castaway Chronicles, Episodes 1 and 2. As 7 is a joint score for both of the games currently. I think that the second episode is much stronger than the first one, but I do like a lot about each. Now, the first one has this cool system of almost a tower defense style where these dinosaurs are going to be attacking your camp, and I like how you're going to trade in all of the dinosaurs you defeat, or how well you protect, or how well you've prepared your defenses for different rewards. I find that really satisfying. But in the second one, you have some really cool exploration mechanisms where you're playing cards into the different areas that you're exploring, and you also have a huge tech tree of upgrades on your personal player board, so whenever you get a scoring ability or increase your abilities in certain scoring areas, you're also getting to upgrade on these different tech trees and customize your abilities. I love the choices, and it's pretty overwhelming at first, but after playing through, the choices are sensical, and it makes me feel like this is a game that is actually more approachable than it seems, because everything just has a sequence, and the sequence makes sense. It reminds me a lot in feel to something like the Gallerist, where the theme helps the mechanics greatly, and it's not going to be a huge barrier if at least one person knows the game pretty dang well. So I'm happy to be that person. I'm excited to play more Perseverance Castaway Chronicles, particularly Episode 2. We've got the Sinister Motives expansion for Marvel Champions, introducing Ghost SpyDer and Miles Morales Spider-Man. You've also got some great encounters, one of my favorite being the Sinister 6 encounter. I love the way that it changes based on if you're playing the standard or expert mode. I always play an expert when I play Marvel Champions, and so there's some really cool rules that actually change on the cards themselves and not just additional cards you're adding. I love this because it's going to add even more replayability based on the different characters you play, and you could ramp up that difficulty even more by using the standard 2 Expert 2 sets from Red Hood, or by using heroes that just aren't as strong. I love the customization here. I really like Gwen Stacy, Ghost SpyDer. I do have some issues with Miles Morales, but I think he is still a fun character to play, especially on those easier modes. We got all of the new content for Super Fantasy Brawl Round 2, one of my favorite skirmish games in general, my go-to 2-player competitive, but the Round 2 pledge in particular came with 3 brand new sets of factions, and these factions all have a theme around them, with the first theme being all about the Holy Light. So we have the Radiant Authority with King Alistair, Khaleesi, and Sir Tentaclad. I think out of those 3, my favorite's Sir Tentaclad. I love how he's got the tentacles that you can grapple things, and his upgrade side lets him actually hang on to the statues and not be moved. A lot of cool things with him, and I love just his persona in general. And then we have the Hot Trick, which every character has a hat, which is kind of a silly theme, but sure, we'll go with it. And I think out of all of these, my favorite is Jacques Lebeau. I think he's super funny. He's got all of these different reactions that deal tons of damage, which is really cool. And he's got a lot of different combos with you discarding cards to trigger different effects. Very versatile, very strong. I also think Nicked is a very strong contender. He's a bunch of rabbits in a costume, and they're going to be throwing each other around the rink. And he's got a lot of interesting keywords that work well, and he also is going to get stronger based on what cards are in your discard pile. Cool things to plan for there. And And lastly, we have Mental Might, which gave us Isabella, Zinchen, and Alchemy. My favorite has to be Alchemy. I've been waiting for him for a long time. Just the idea of a genie in this game sounds so fun, and he did not disappoint. He's got a lot of strength when it comes to dealing direct damage to shielded characters, which I love because I found shield characters to be very difficult to deal with in the original printing of the game. In addition, he has some really cool abilities where you can refresh your cores, so you can do some combos where you're moving and positioning with him, and then also being able to reactivate colors that you normally wouldn't be able to use multiple times at a turn. Lots of great plays that can happen with Alchemy, and his upgrade is crazy because it allows you to use a basic core action every turn. Just more value every single round. Crazy strong. With the announcement of the Rails to the North expansion, we finally pulled the trigger on Great Western Trail 2nd Edition. The original had been one of my favorites for a long time, and I loved playing with the expansion, so I was happy to hear that we could start with this new one. It makes a lot of minor changes to the game, which I think are very good. It's going to allow you to explore the different strategies. It also includes some small updates, including a Cemental Cow expansion. I think this one is fine. It's not really my favorite thing. It's honestly something that you could just ignore and not really worry about, but I think it's cool to have a cow that you're going to consistently be trying to find so that it does grow over time. But the other thing that it adds is a solo mode, which works so well. I think that this is an auto buy if you enjoy solo in general and you don't have Great Western Trail already, and I think it's implemented extremely, extremely well. So my recommendation is if you enjoy solo modes and you like the Fister style of gameplay, give this one a try. That is Great Western Trail. Next is the social deduction game Shadowhunters. This has you playing as a variety of roles, moving around a map and attacking each other, dealing damage with your weapons and items, but also gaining information by using location effects. You'll be able to try to predict who each character is and actually have information to go off of. I love that there are these unique player abilities, unique win conditions. It took the idea of werewolf, put it onto a board, and gave you actual ways to pull out information throughout the course of play. You also have this cool system, very similar to something like Battlestar Galactica, where you can flip over your character in the middle of the game to get a special ability, but now everybody knows exactly what character you are, what team you are on. I love this choice that each player individually has. Now, I originally had played a friend's copy of this, and I appreciated the diverse roles as well as the accessibility of the game. It's very easy to teach and play, and I think that's one of its biggest strengths. It's been out of print for a long time though, but luckily one of our local game stores, J&J's Hobbies and Games, they've got a great selection with anything that you could think of, from Cloudspire to Kingdom Death Monster to out of print stuff like Shadowhunters. So I love stopping in there from time to time and seeing what gems I can find, and Shadowhunters was a no-brainer pick. Happy to have it in our library. Our next game is Who Did What. This is actually designed by a local game designer, Brenda Spear. She's native to Colorado Springs and reached out to me to see if this would be a good fit for our library. She gave us a free copy and said, try it out, give it a try, and let me know what you think. Well, Brenda, I have some good news for you. I think this is going to be a great fit for our library. This is essentially a combination of Cards Against Humanity and Say Anything, but with a great twist where the people who are playing at the table are actually going to be the prompts that are in the game. I love this system. You have these cards that say who, and that's the people at the table. You can even include other people from outside of the game if you want, some shared acquaintances. And then you have the did, which is the scenario where you'll plug in those characters from the who. And then you have the what. Every player except for the judge is going to respond with a question of some sort. This leads to a built-in meta-narrative that's going to go from card to card, which is wonderful because your gaming experience evolves and you generally will leave the game with some form of inside jokes, which I think is awesome. This game has the potential to build some moments that actually last past the gaming session. I also think that the writing of the game is very strong. It's going to present you with different scenarios that I think are going to elicit some clever responses. This is one of my favorite style of party games where the players are bringing the creativity with them, and it's not the game that's actually funny, it's everyone at the table. This leads to some wonderful laughs, wonderful moments, and I think it's one that you need to check out. Now, this game is a little bit hard to reach, and I think it's something that you need to know. It is the whodidwhatgame.com. I'll leave a link in the description below. I don't get any kickback for this or anything, but I do want to give a big shout out to Brenda Spear because this game is pretty great. It's going to be my go-to when it comes to this creative style. I don't know if it's yet reached that height of Balderdash for me, because I do think that the competition and the deception in Balderdash is pretty dang impressive, but Who Did What is wonderful for a very relaxed experience to create some lasting memories. And our last entry is the solo expansion for Terra Mystica. And the reason it's right here is because it's just came in. I have not had the opportunity to play it yet, but the artwork is wonderful. I'm in the middle of sleeving it right now, and it looks great. I love this idea of being able to play Terra Mystica whenever I want, and you can also play it to bolster up that lower player number experience. So if you're playing a 2-player game, you could throw in the Autumn faction. I love that. It works great in Gaia Project, and I can only see it doing well here. I've been able to play a lot of Terra Mystica recently, particularly with the new Merchants of the Sea expansion, and I think that one is wonderful. If you haven't given it a try yet, and you know you like Terra Mystica, try Merchants of the Sea, and if you're looking to play more Terra Mystica, get the solo one, because now you can play it all the time. Very excited to try it. If you played this one, let me know down in the comments. And that brings us to our last section, the pre-orders. Starting off with the new hero pack for Marvel Champions, this is Spider-Ham, a fourth wall breaking set where you're going to have to say things out loud, do things based on the time of the day, something like that. Very Deadpool-y, very cartoony, but I think it works well here. Announced on April Fools, a lot of us were wondering if this was actually a real thing, but seeing as it was included in those leaks earlier, we figured, hey, this is an actual product, and lo and behold, there is a pre-order link. Next up, we have the Outer Rim expansion, Unfinished Business. This is a more expansion, more characters, more ships, more encounters, more planets, but one cool thing they have is this new core world mechanism that makes the ring now an entire circle. So it's going to help out with that mobility and movement, and I'm excited. This is just going to make the accessibility a little bit higher and make it a little less frustrating when you find goals that are on the entire other side of the Outer Rim. Excited to give this one a try. Next is another hero pack for Marvel Champions. This is SpyDer, another web warrior that looks amazing. Now, right off the bat, you might look at it and be like, oh my gosh, only a 3-hand size? Is this Hulk all over again? Fear not, it looks like this character has 2 separate identities that are split across multiple cards. And I think this is a really cool concept. And speaking of Hulk, it looks like this character also will have some different effects that will buff characters with big health totals. This means Thor, Hulk, and Web Warrior here, SpyDer, are all going to have upgrades that function well together. I love the different things that Marvel Champions is doing with the identity cards in particular. We saw a lot with Riri Williams with her Iron Heart suit, and I'm excited to see what Penny Parker and the Spider suit have for us in store. Super excited to try this one. That is SpyDer. And if you've been watching this channel for a while, you know that I love Sleeping Gods. So Sleeping Gods Distant Skies, this was an instant bag for me. Very excited to try out this new standalone game in the world. It looks like they've taken a lot of the criticism and feedback and implemented into this game. Now, I didn't really have any criticism or feedback for the game. I pretty much enjoyed everything about it, but a lot of the issues were maybe managing too many characters. They've shranken the size of the crew, and they've changed up some of the combat. So I'm excited to see the changes, how they're implemented, and who knows, maybe I'll enjoy Distant Skies even more than I enjoyed the original. You've got new islands, new miniatures, and you can even get that new print and play expansion that they released a while ago in an actual version, the Primeval Peril here. I'm excited to actually put this one in the library too, because this means that I can teach this to a group of people in a shorter playtime session, and that means that this one's actually going to get played probably a bit more with new groups. Very excited for Sleeping Gods in general, and this Distant Skies, Primeval Peril, let's add some new Sleeping God content to the library. Next up is the Great Wall, and this is the reprint for the game, but I'm only going to mention it briefly. I've only gone into this for a single $1, and that's because I have a friend who has a copy of the game, and I want to give it a try before I back it. This is a pretty expensive project, and if I do back it, we're probably going to get the Sundrop all in, so it's about €350, which is pretty insane. So I want to make sure it's actually a good game before I jump into it. So the theme is interesting, hopefully the gameplay is neat, and if it's a great game, it's going into our library. So for right now, $1 pledge, so I can get in that pledge manager. Hopefully it's awesome. Up next, we have Last Light, which promises to be a 4S experience played in 60 minutes. Now, the reason that I'm backing this is because it's supposed to play 6 players very, very well. And I'm always looking for games that fit that bill. Most people are pretty adverse to splitting up into smaller groups when it comes to playing games, and so having a game that plays a high player count is pretty important for me, particularly in the case of the library. Now, that being said, I think that backing it now is a great call because there's just so much extra content in this deluxe edition. If it's anything like the For Science Kickstarter, there'll just be a lot of expansion content to jump into over and over again, and a lot of variants and actual noticeable upgrades when it comes to the components. We'll not only be getting rid of the cardboard tokens and replacing them with upgrades, but also getting access to new upgraded factions, new exclusive content, and just more variability in general. I also like the idea of getting extra sets of dice for the game, so that way we can put them all around the table and make it just easier for everybody to enjoy and play the experience. Obviously, going to be getting the expansions here so we can play with more people, wonderful, and I'm excited to try this one. I hope that it delivers on its promise of this 4x experience in an hour with 6 people. That is wild. Up next is Rove, a solo experience by Buttonshy, where you'll be this cute little rover going around different planets trying to satisfy these different objectives. Now, this was recommended to me by Tia over at Takaijo. This placed very highly on our most recent solo games list, so go take a look at that video if you're curious as to her other thoughts on the game. But I'm going with this based purely on the strength of her recommendation, so I hope that it serves our library well. With the West Kingdom wrapped up, now we move on to the South Tigris with Wayfarers of the South Tigris by Garphill Games. I'm extremely interested to see how this dice placement works and if this will be a positive kickstart to the new series of games. It's got a solo mode, solid mechanisms already from a company that I'm always looking forward to what comes out next from them. So once again, looking at this sight unseen, and I hope that it is wonderful when it arrives. And our last pre-order is for Oranienburger Kanal. This is an Uwe Rosenberg game that has actually emerged from his creation of a game that has not been completed yet. But I really like the way that Uwe does this, where he'll have a mechanism that he's very interested to explore in a game. For example, Patchwork spawned from Feast for Odin, go figure, but I love how he can take that mechanism and distill it and create something new. And in this case, it's Oranienburger Kanal. And the reason that I'm really backing this, though, is because I recently had a gameplay of Glass Road, a 2-player version, and it was lovely. And I just can't recommend it enough, Glass Road at the 2-player count. And this employs the same resource whale mechanism, but also uses card play in the form of different building cards from things like Noosfjord. You'll be placing them onto your board and filling them up, activating them at different times. I love the card systems in Uwe's games in general, and this seems to come with a lot of extra sets of cards as well, with the expansion sets included with the game, so you've got a lot of variety and a lot to explore. I'm excited, and I love that it's got a solo mode so I can play it all the time, but it looks for a very nice 2-player experience with a progressive worker placement action system, as well as multiple activations of different things that you'll be building. Excited to try this one. That is the Oranienburger Kanal. And that's the library update. Those are all the games that entered the SideGame library in the month of April. Which games entered your personal library in April? Which of these games are you most excited for? Did you pre-order any of these? Have you received any of these in your collection? Which games do you agree with us on? Which ones do you disagree with? We'd love to hear what you think. But thank you so much for watching SideGame Strong.